If you were around in the 1960s, you probably remember the exact moment when the muscle car era truly began. Picture this, 1964 and Pontiac unleashes the GTO onto American streets. That moment changed everything. For those of us who lived and breathed cars during those golden years, the GTO wasn't just another performance car. It was a revolution on wheels, the kind of machine that made your heart race just hearing it rumble down Main Street. But today, we're going to talk about something different. Something that even the most dedicated muscle car enthusiasts might have missed. While Pontiac was busy creating headlines with the GTO, they were quietly working on another project, one that would bring that intoxicating muscle car performance to a younger generation of drivers who couldn't quite stretch their budgets to GTO territory. Let's set the scene. It's 1970 and America is muscle car crazy. Every manufacturer is trying to outdo each other with bigger engines, bolder stripes, and more impressive performance numbers. The GTO had evolved into a premium muscle car, with prices climbing year after year to keep pace with new technology and rising inflation. At Pontiac, the marketing team recognized a growing problem. They were losing young buyers who simply couldn't afford to join the muscle car revolution. Their solution? Create what might be the ultimate sleeper of the muscle car era, the GT37. But to understand what made the GT37 special, we need to look at its humble beginnings as the T37, which was essentially a stripped-down Pontiac Lemons. When I say stripped down, I mean they took everything out that wasn't absolutely necessary. The result? A base price of just $2,600, a figure that turned heads even back then because it undercut the traditionally budget-friendly Chevrolet lineup. Now, that base, T37 with its inline-six engine wasn't going to win any races, unless maybe you were up against a Volkswagen Beetle on a good day. But here's where Pontiac's genius came into play. They created an extensive options list that would let buyers transform their bargain basement T37 into something truly special. The GT37 package was more than just a trim level, it was a complete transformation. Let's break down what made these cars so special, starting with the powertrains. In 1971, Pontiac offered 3 V8 options that would make any performance enthusiast smile. First, there was the 350 cubic inch V8 making a respectable 250 horsepower. Step up to the 400 cubic inch engine and you got 265 horses under the hood. But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is something that even many Pontiac experts don't know. For 1 year only, you could order your GT37 with the same 455 HO engine that powered the mighty GTO. Let that sink in for a moment. The same engine that made the GTO a legend could be ordered in its budget-friendly little brother. We're talking about 335 horsepower and more than 450 pound-feet of torque numbers that would make most modern cars blush. Only about 50 people were smart enough, or maybe crazy enough, to check that particular option box, making these cars some of the rarest and most desirable muscle cars ever built. The transmission choices were equally impressive. Every GT37 came standard with a 3-speed manual transmission and a Hurst shifter, already a step up from the basic T37. But the options list included 3 different 4-speed manuals, the M20, M21, or M22, each with its own gear ratios to suit different driving styles. For those who preferred automatic shifting, the bulletproof turbo 400 transmission was available. And when it came to rear-end gearing, you could choose from 3.55s, 3.90s, and even tire-shredding 4.33 ratios. The exterior of the GT37 was just as carefully considered. Pontiac offered 3 different bold side stripe designs throughout the production run. Each had its own distinct character, and they all screamed performance without being as in-your-face as some of the competition. GT37 badges adorned the rear fenders, grille, and deck lid, giving the car a purposeful look that set it apart from regular T37s without trying to imitate its GTO big brother. The dual exhaust system wasn't just for show. It was lifted directly from the GTO parts bin, complete with chrome tips. Hood pins, which were all the rage in 1971, came as part of the package, adding both style and a race-inspired touch. The wheel options were equally impressive, ranging from steel wheels with dog-dish hubcaps to some of the most attractive Rally 2 wheels ever fitted to a Pontiac. Color choices ran the gamut from subtle to spectacular. You could order your GT37 in sophisticated burgundy or classic polar white, but for those who wanted to make a statement, colors like cardinal red and tropical lime ensured your car would never go unnoticed. A rear deck spoiler was optional, and while it might not have added much in terms of actual downforce, it certainly looked the part. Performance? Let's talk numbers. With the 455 HO engine and a 4-speed manual, these cars were capable of low 14-second quarter-mile times right out of the box. With a few minor adjustments, the kind any shade tree mechanic could handle in their garage, high 13s were entirely achievable. Remember, this was 1971, when emissions regulations were already starting to strangle performance engines. These were serious numbers for the time. The suspension setup was where you could tell Pontiac had to make some compromises to keep the price down. While the GTO benefited from front and rear sway bars and sophisticated suspension tuning, the GT37 took a simpler approach. Instead of a rear sway bar, it used stiffer rear springs. This meant the ride was a bit rougher than the GTO, and handling wasn't quite as refined. But for straight-line performance, which, let's be honest, was what most buyers cared about, the GT37 could hold its own against much more expensive machinery. Braking was another area where buyers had choices to make. Standard four-wheel drum brakes were adequate for normal driving, but anyone planning to exploit the car's performance potential usually opted for the front disc brake package. Power assist was available and recommended, especially with the bigger engines. The interior was basic but functional. The standard 3-spoke steering wheel looked sporty enough, and the Hurst shifter was a joy to use. The seats were comfortable, if not quite as supportive as the GTOs, and the instrumentation was clear and easy to read. Remember, this was meant to be a budget-friendly alternative to the GTO, so some luxury features were sacrificed to keep the price down. Speaking of price, this is where the GT37 story gets interesting. A basic GT37 with the 350 V8 and 3-speed manual represented an incredible performance value. But start checking option boxes, particularly that 455 HO engine, 4-speed transmission, and power disc brakes, and the price could easily climb past $4,000. At that point, you were within striking distance of GTO territory, and many buyers couldn't resist the allure of the GTO badge. This pricing reality, combined with the muscle car era's impending decline, meant the GT37's time in the spotlight was brief. In 1971, Pontiac sold about 10,000 GTOs, while total GT37 production for both 1970 and 1971 combined was around 7,000 units. By 1972, the GT37 was replaced by the Lemons GT, which took a more luxury-oriented approach to performance. Today, these cars, particularly the rare 455 HO models, are highly sought after by collectors who understand their historical significance. They represent a unique moment in automotive history, when Pontiac found a way to deliver genuine muscle car performance to buyers on a budget. The GT37 wasn't just a stripped-down GTO, it was its own machine with its own character and its own place in muscle car history. For those of us who remember these cars when they were new, they represent something special, a time when American manufacturers were building some of the most exciting cars ever to hit the street, and doing everything they could to make that performance accessible to everyone. I'd love to hear your memories of these amazing machines. Were you one of the lucky few who owned a GT37? Maybe you raced against one at the local drag strip, or remember seeing one at your neighborhood Pontiac dealer? Share your stories in the comments below. Every memory helps keep this important piece of automotive history alive. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into muscle car history, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got plenty more stories to tell about the golden age of American performance cars. Until next time, keep those memories and those engines running strong.